Okay, I'd like to say good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for waiting, and welcome to Living Without Single-Use Plastics, presented in partnership between Mind Your Plastic, Ajax Public Library, the Ajax Partnership Fund, and the Town of Ajax Planning and Development Services. My name is Catherine, and I'm an adult services librarian working with the Ajax Public Library. Before we begin, I just wanted to start by quickly covering a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to have two presentations today from our partners this evening, the first from the Town of Ajax and the second from Mind Your Plastic. This evening's program is being recorded, so I please ask that you keep yourself muted and your cameras turned off to minimize any distractions. The chat button is located along the bottom of the screen, so if you ever have any questions or comments you'd like to share throughout the presentation, please feel free to type them in the chat. We will be hosting a Q&A session at the end after the two presentations have concluded, and we'll answer the questions in the order that they were sent. Just as a test for the chat function to make sure it's working, if you want to type in where you're tuning in from tonight. If you ever experience any technical difficulties this evening, I do ask that you exit the Zoom program and try to re-enter with the link that you received in the email from me. If the issue still continues to persist after you've reconnected, please place a comment in the chat and I'll try to do my best to assist you. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our first presenter for the evening, Alessia Mendoza from the Town of Ajax Planning and Development Services. She's going to be covering the current environmental initiatives and programs that are going on in the town. Welcome, Alessia.
Thank you so much, Catherine. Hi, everyone. As Catherine mentioned, I work for the Town of Ajax in the Environment, Sustainability, and Climate Change Department. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here. I hope everyone can see that. There. Okay, awesome. So we do have quite a bit of initiatives happening here within the Town of Ajax, which is really excited. One of our biggest projects is our Sustainable Neighborhood Action Program, where basically we focus on a specific area in Ajax and find ways to improve and revitalize green spaces, as well as your own home. So we are currently promoting our home retrofit program. You can see all the details here on the screen. Basically, we go out and we do home visits and give you one-on-one consultation on creating a sustainable living space, where if you qualify and you participate within this program, you can win a free rain barrel. You do have to live within the selected area, which is shown on the screen there. But if you do, you can feel free to email me or call me. I'll put my information in the chat. And then we go out, visit you, and you even get a couple of gifts as well. We are also planning a heat pump workshop coming up in November in collaboration with TRCA. We're supposed to be November 1st, but we're still getting the details fixed out for that one. And we also have a new sustainability newsletter, which has become quite popular. So if you're also interested in subscribing to our newsletter, where you'll get all the fun programs that we're having. You can also send me an email or call me as well. And again, I'll put that information in the chat there. So thank you, Catherine.
All right, thank you so much for the updates, Alessia. So our next presenter is Michelle Brake, who's the Environmental Policy Analyst at Mind Your Plastic, which is a Canadian nonprofit whose mission is to eliminate plastic pollution in Canada. Michelle has a professional background in policy and advocacy with a passion for sustainability and the environment. She also has a Master of Applied Politics from Wilfrid Laurier University, during which she specialized in transboundary water governance and environmental policy. In her position with Mind Your Plastic, she works closely with Canadian municipalities and businesses to promote policy that eliminates disposable packaging and educates Canadians about the benefits of reusable alternatives. Recognizing the impacts of plastic pollution are widespread on both environmental and human health, Michelle ardently advocates for the reduction of single-use materials and a shift towards more circular systems. We're so lucky to have her with us tonight. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Michelle to begin her presentation. Welcome, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. I'll just share my screen here. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that okay. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction, Catherine. And thank you for having us here today. to talk about how we can live without single-use plastics and explore everyday alternatives that produce less waste. So a little bit about our organization before we dive into some of the content in the webinar tonight. Mind Your Plastic is a registered Canadian charity, and we are dedicated, as Catherine mentioned, to ending plastic pollution in Canada. We do this in a variety of different ways, but particularly by advocating for Canadian businesses to take really impactful action in eliminating their plastic waste footprint, by driving policy change, and creating really progressive solutions at the municipal government level. And then by promoting the circular economy in all areas, but particularly in schools, and engaging students and youth, and educating them about how they can contribute to a world with less plastic pollution. So this webinar today is brought to you in partnership with the town of Ajax. And through our partnership with Ajax, we hope to be able to engage the public in some really great educational and engaging conversations, and also help advocate for, those ways that we can reduce our daily dependence on single-use materials, and really to kind of help us all identify some of the easier shifts that we can make to really feel better about, the impact that we're having on the environment and the materials that we're purchasing. And through this collaboration, we've actually produced a toolkit to reduce and eliminate single-use materials at events in Ajax, and that's available online on the Town of Ajax website. But that spirit of reduction kind of carries over to all areas of our lives, which is what we're going to be focused more on tonight, in the more general ways that we can reduce our single-use footprint. So plastic pollution really is a collective problem that requires really great collaborative solutions across our community. So we just want to thank you for, your interest in learning about some of these solutions tonight, and being with us and being willing to learn today. So I'm here to talk about the issue and problem with plastic pollution, but what are some of the ways that plastic pollution creates problems, and how do we engage with that? Well, we know that less than 9% of all plastic produced around the world and right here in Canada actually gets recycled. So all of the other plastics that are generated and that we use on a daily basis are either ending up in landfills, or they end up burned or incinerated, or ultimately in our environment as pollution. By 2050, it's estimated that there's going to be more plastic in our oceans than fish. And every minute, at least one dump truck of plastic actually enters the ocean. So, and recent estimates have put that closer to 2 full dump trucks full of plastic. So a little bit concerning. On the climate change side of things, plastic production, as well as that burning of plastic that I mentioned, can actually generate 850 million tons of greenhouse gases every year. So that's a large, just general environmental impact as well. And then on top of that, plastic pollution has detrimental health impacts. It can be deadly for wildlife that ingests plastic or gets entangled. I'm sure we've all kind of seen pictures or videos or heard about, birds that are consuming microplastics that end up accumulating in their stomachs, or, whales that have been entangled in ghost fishing gear. And all of those things are a direct result of plastic pollution. And on the human health side of things, recent studies have found plastic is found in increasing amounts throughout our bodies, from our blood and lungs to breast milk, and to even most recently in the human heart. So all of these sort of ripple effects from our use of plastic and the resulting pollution are concerning, not only for the environment, but also for our own personal health as well. Our problem with kind of plastic and overconsumption doesn't just stop at plastic materials. It really has everything to do with our reliance and the problem of single use. And what do we mean by single use? So single use refers to all of the items and packaging that we encounter on a daily basis And these items are specifically designed and manufactured to be used only once or for a very short period of time and then immediately discarded. And why are these single-use items so popular? Well, we're consumers in a linear economy and a linear system, which means that the products that we often have available to us to purchase are created with the intention of only briefly being used and then becoming waste. So this is what we call a take, make, waste process. And within this process, convenience and cheap materials are really prioritized without taking into account all of the costs, whether that be environmental or financial, that are associated with generating these excessive amounts of waste. And single use is an essential part of the linear economy, which is demonstrated here at the bottom by that graphic, where we take natural resources from the environment, whether that's cutting down trees or fracking for oil, to make those products that we buy and we use every day. And then after we've used that product or packaging once, it becomes waste and ends up in the garbage or the landfill. And as we know, from all of the pollution and waste that we're currently dealing with, this just isn't a sustainable system. We're consuming more and more materials every year, and we know from the 9% that actually gets recycled that our recycling systems just can't really handle what we're using every day. A system that we're looking towards as one that will use our materials to their maximum potential is called the circular economy. And the circular economy is defined as an economic system that takes care of the renewable resources that are used, it eliminates waste, and it reuses and recycles our material goods. And it has several really important elements that distinguish it from our current linear economy. And the first one there is that it reduces the amount of materials and resources in circulation that we need to produce and manufacture the products and packaging that we use. So immediately it gets rid of a lot of the waste that we're encountering just by keeping the materials in circulation. And this kind of economy uses our waste as a resource to produce new materials, to produce new products. So if a product does come to the end of its life, instead of ending up in a landfill, we find new ways to reincorporate it into the economy. And then ultimately, it would decrease and eventually eliminate the creation of most of our unnecessary waste that we're encountering every day. And the graphic on the right here gives a visual of how that circular economy would function, where we initially have those raw materials manufactured into our products. Those products get used by us, the consumer, and then they're returned around the circle to be recycled, or even better yet, to be reused or repaired or refurbished with very little or almost no residual waste. And that process hopefully, continues indefinitely in that cycle, and those materials get kept in our economy for a long, long time. And within the circular economy, we look towards the waste hierarchy to be able to direct our prioritization of materials. So the waste hierarchy gives us a really great guide on how to rank our waste management options. And through this ranking, we want to minimize our waste and really maximize the amount of use that we're getting out of the materials that we purchase. And on the right here, we actually have your local Durham region waste hierarchy, and that highlights the 5 R's. So you're rethinking the products that you buy, you're reducing the amount of waste you produce, you're reusing a product more than once, recycling waste into new products, and then recovering to generate energy from waste. And at the very bottom there, you have disposal, and that's kind of the least preferred option. And we want to really minimize the amount that we dispose by prioritizing those other options within the hierarchy. And as any hierarchy it's organized by the most preferred and the best use of materials there at the top of the pyramid, and the lowest and least preferred there at the bottom. So this gives us a great overview of where we really want to place our emphasis when it comes to where our waste goes, or how we can rethink or avoid or reuse the waste that we do create. So we've heard about kind of all of the systems that lead us to interact with single use so frequently. But what are some of these common products that we encounter? And, what areas of our lives do they appear? So sometimes we can really easily recognize these plastics and these single-use materials as problematic, and then we can do what we can to avoid them. On the screen here, probably the most recognizable materials would be, your plastic water bottle there, your coffee cup, a styrofoam food container, the plastic grocery bags, and we see these items, quite literally everywhere we go, grocery stores, at your special events, at your favorite restaurant or coffee shop. They're essentially unavoidable. But what's really great about um, having seen these items so often is that they've actually become the items that we have some of the most easy replacements for. And we can implement those options in order to avoid some of the single-use counterparts as well. So, bringing your reusable water bottle, your reusable coffee cup, your reusable shopping bag, those are all kind of nice, simple swaps. But other products we don't necessarily realize are problematic until we maybe dig a little bit deeper. In food products, on the bottom right hand there, we have a peanut butter jar. And this may seem like a fairly, recognizable and straightforward plastic that we can recycle. But it actually tends to be a little more, complex or problematic because there's a risk there of contaminating the recycling stream. So if you think back to the last plastic jar of peanut butter that you've purchased, when you think about that, did you clean the jar completely? Did you get all the peanut butter residue out of there? Because if you didn't, it likely wasn't recycled. So there's really a lot of different layers that go into some of these materials that we don't necessarily think about. So it's great to kind of take the opportunity within these webinars to bring some of those ideas forward and find out how we can make other choices that might be a little bit more beneficial. There's also some really sneaky plastics, like a toothpaste tube. You might not think of something that includes single-use plastics, but it's actually multi-layered and multi-material, and it can't be recycled. And there are programs where you can ship your toothpaste tubes when they're empty back to somewhere like a TerraCycle. But often, instead of being recycled into a new toothpaste tube, which is what we would want to see with all of our packaging that is getting recycled, instead it often gets downcycled into, a construction material or an asphalt filler, which doesn't keep the material at its highest value. So we want to try and avoid that as well. On the left hand of the screen, you've got balloons, and balloons are decor that we see kind of all the time at events and special occasions, but they're also made of a combination of materials and layers that can't be recycled. So from, a latex balloon to a mylar foil balloon, when that balloon gets popped at the end of a party, it has to be landfilled. And the same goes for, confetti and plastic glitter, which we know in the best of times are difficult to collect and clean up after they've been used. If you think of, a little glitter cannon that have been really popular lately, I think we've all encountered glitter to some extent, where you've found it for weeks on your clothes or on your skin afterwards. Those really small pieces of plastic that are hard to collect within your own home, they're hard to collect. Those end up in the environment, and they actually end up degrading even further into smaller microplastics that leach into our soils and waterways and end up impacting our ecosystems. So within the toolkit that we created for Ajax, that goes over some really great alternatives to event plastics, instead of your plastic confetti cannons. Maybe you're looking more into a natural confetti like a flower petal, or even paper would be a better option than some of the plastics that are currently on the market with glitter and confetti. Stand-up pouches, which there's an example there of the almonds on the right-hand side. We see in our grocery aisles and frozen food sections a lot. You know, I'm sure if you've bought frozen fruit or vegetables lately, you've seen them come in some sort of stand-up plastic pouch. And these pouches are also typically multi-material. Sometimes they have clear plastic windows like the one displayed there. A lot of the time they're going to have some sort of zipper or enclosure piece that are difficult or impossible to separate in order for the pouch itself to be recycled. So these are also materials that have to be garbaged and end up as plastic waste in our landfills. Tea bags are a really interesting one. Depending on the materials that are used in the bag itself, they can actually lead to microplastics seeping into your tea. And some are made of paper, and those ones can absolutely be placed in the organic stream. But the silkier feeling tea bags are often actually made of a nylon or a PET plastic that can result in microplastic shedding in your drink. And a lot of people have moved kind of towards a stainless steel reusable tea steeper and loose leaf tea to avoid that interaction with potential plastics. There's also a couple examples here, like cigarette butts. A cigarette butt in and of itself is kind of a very littered item, but they do have plastic filters in them. So whenever a cigarette butt gets littered in the environment, as it degrades, that plastic turns into smaller pieces and once again leaches into soil and waterways to create a bigger microplastic pollution issue. The disposable wipes as well have made from plastic materials and are not recyclable and often are not compostable. So they're problematic. And the final example there in the middle is baby food pouches and other sort of squeeze format pouches, because these are made of multiple materials again, which is a common thread in what makes things not recyclable. They also have to be landfilled. And it's really interesting that a lot of these materials or a lot of these products are made from plastics, and it might seem logical for them to be able to be recycled, but because there's so many layers and there's adhesives and different things that are sticking these materials together, it ends up being inefficient and not economical to recycle them. So they get sorted out and they end up in landfill. But what's really interesting about the pouches specifically is that we don't really know kind of the full exposure impacts of plastics on, you know, children and humans. And so many brands have moved their baby food lines almost exclusively into, you know, lightweight plastic pouches or, you know, bottles, instead of, you know, what we may have been used to growing up in reusable glass jars. So these are just, you know, some of the plastics that we encounter in our day-to-day lives, you know, from in the grocery store to our special events, but they really are everywhere we look. And the closer we look, the more plastics you're going to find. But when we look at how can we replace these single-use items in our daily lives, the recommendation that we go with is to choose reuse first. So if the item has a reusable alternative, I would definitely seek that out as kind of your primary option. And there's no sort of widely agreed upon definition of what constitutes a reusable right now, but we believe a reusable can be defined as a product or, you know, packaging that allows either the business or you as a consumer to be able to put the same type of product back in its original packaging. So if you buy a glass jar of peanut butter, and you use that up and you clean it out and bring it back, you should be able to refill that jar back up with the peanut butter. So it keeps that same sort of purpose. The reusable would be designed in and of itself to be able to be returned and refilled. It's free of chemicals of concern, so you can use it without worrying for your health. And then it can also withstand multiple rounds of reuse. So if it's a reusable material, it can be reused 5, 10, 100 times. And that actually augments the environmental benefit of that material as well. So there are so many really, really great ways and effective ways to incorporate reuse. There's a lot of options and systems that are available to us that we can take advantage of. And just a few of them are listed here on this slide today. And some are more formal, and some are more informal and led by, us, the consumer. So it really depends on, what's available in your area, and what you have available to you within your own lifestyle that you can really take advantage of. So the first option there is reusable cup and serviceware systems. So this is an option that could be provided by, a restaurant or a cafe, where you essentially borrow the foodware that you need to consume or your drink or your meal. For instance, if you're dining in at a restaurant or a fast food place, they offer to serve your food on a real plate with real cutlery that's stainless steel or ceramic, instead of providing you with several different pieces of single-use foodware, like a thin plastic food container, a single-use fork, a paper cup that might be lined with plastic that makes it non-recyclable. So it's kind of like a cafeteria style service that, prevents waste from being produced by using reusable foodware instead. The second option there is deposit refund systems. And deposit refund systems for reusables are also becoming really popular, where you pay an initial deposit of $2 to $5 on, say, a to-go coffee cup. And then when you're done your coffee, you can return your coffee cup, maybe to the cafe itself, or maybe there's a really great network of collection points around town that you can drop your cup back in and get your deposit back. But often there's, a third party that comes in and collects all of those cups and washes and sanitizes them and then returns them back to the coffee shop. So you might have heard of companies like Friendlier out of Guelph or Muse in Toronto that are providing this really great service. And really, as a consumer, all you have to do is put down your initial deposit and return your container, and they take care of the rest. And then finally there, we have BYO containers. And this is a really fantastic option, where you bring your own, cup or container to a restaurant, or even, to the deli at your favorite grocery store. And it's a really easy way to introduce reuse into your life. If some of these systems, don't already exist in the restaurants or grocery stores in your community, you can really take the initiative to just start reusing on your own. So you can bring your own reusable coffee cup or containers for your takeout or leftovers, and really reduce your waste wherever you go, and be able to kind of forge your own path to reuse. And even sort of following COVID, some businesses have moved away from allowing BYO models, but local health authorities have actually, confirmed that reusables are perfectly safe and perfectly sanitary when they're clean and used properly. So that's a really great option. And some of these sort of reusable switches are pictured here on the right. As I mentioned, bringing your own reusable travel coffee cup, doing a bulk refill wherever you can, especially for dry goods, like nuts or cereals or, candies. Often there's a bulk section in your grocery store. You might also have a local refillery nearby that you can support, or even a store like a bulk barn that actually encourages you to bring your own reusable container. And they go so far as to offer, a 15% discount if you bring your own reusable containers and you shop on their sustainable Sundays. So there's some really great sort of bulk options as well, where you can bring your own container. There are also really simple switches like bringing along a cloth produce bag instead of resorting to those thin plastic produce bags for fruit or veggies. And there's also opportunities to participate in initiatives that have been developed by, large household brands, pictured in the top right there, like Dove's refillable deodorant packaging that actually allows you to buy the deodorant stick packaging, and then you can continue to purchase refills without having to keep rebuying that single-use plastic. So that's really a really great option as well. And one of the best parts about reuse is that it's actually, an older system that's just being reinvented right now in a new way. And there are so many different options that are being developed and launched by, both these huge household brands and names, and as well as, smaller local businesses. So there's lots to try and really find what works best for you and your lifestyle. So we looked at the best alternative, which was reuse. Now looking at some good alternatives to single-use plastics, wherever maybe reuse isn't possible or you don't have access to a specific reuse solution. You can look for highly recyclable or compostable paper as a good alternative to single-use plastic. Certified recycled paper or recyclable paper is a great first choice. Paper foodware and napkins are better than plastics because they can still be composted if they have food residue on them. And as I mentioned with the peanut butter jar example, if your paper plate or paper napkin has food or grease on it, if you put it in the recycling, it's likely going to contaminate the stream and they will get sorted out and put in the landfill. So it's really great that these paper materials have the option to be put in your green bin and to be able to be composted. If you want to use paper cups and other sort of paperboard products, those are great options as well, as long as you make sure that they are unlined and they don't have a plastic coating on them. That would make them non-recyclable or non-compostable. And that's a trickier one because a lot of the time with paper cups, there is a plastic lining on them that makes them waterproof or makes sure that they don't leak. That's pretty popular with, say, like a paper coffee cup. A lot of the times they're going to be lined with some sort of plastic coating. So, and a great resource, if you're unsure about the recyclability or the compostability of your single-use plastic alternative, is to check out the Region of Durham's Know Before You Throw guide, where you can search for products to find out if they're going to be recyclable or compostable, or if you have to put the material in the landfill. So, as I mentioned, reuse is a top priority. Then you can think about these highly recyclable or compostable items. And then finally, we have the alternatives to avoid. So all single-use items that are non-recyclable or difficult to recycle and disposable should be avoided wherever you can. Items maybe that aren't included in the federal ban that's upcoming, items like a plastic beverage bottle or caps, those condiment sachets, like ketchup packets or those little creamer cups, plastic food pouches, plastic films and shrink wraps. All of those materials have no end-of-life pathway other than being landfilled. So if you can't find a replacement for a lot of these items that is reusable, it's it's great to make the switch to some of those good alternatives like a paper. Is something that will be more compostable. It's also a really great option to look for sort of more bulk solutions. For example, instead of kind of taking those single-use condiment sachets at a restaurant, decline those packets and use your larger format ketchup bottle at home instead. So kind of simple switches like just refusing extras when you don't need them is a really great way to avoid some of these materials. Resource intensive materials should not be used as a single-use product or packaging. For example, glass or stainless steel, they actually take a lot of resources and a lot of energy to create. So it's extremely wasteful to take those materials and consider them as single use. So those are materials that are really great as part of a reusable product. They're meant to be really maximized and used many times over and over again instead of treating them as a single use. And then finally we should always try to avoid compostable plastics and bioplastics that actually aren't compostable. So this is a really tricky one because brands are often trying to sell us on the compostability or the sustainability of their packaging, but that ends up just not being the reality for a lot of these products. Something like a biodegradable coffee pod actually is not practically compostable in your backyard or in your municipality's compost. So we just don't have the infrastructure across Canada right now that can create the right temperatures and the right conditions for some of these compostable plastics to break down effectively. So they also have to be landfilled. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for. Just because a label says, that this packaging is sustainable or this packaging is compostable, if it looks like a plastic and it feels like a plastic, it's not going to be compostable, most likely. You probably will have to put it in the landfill. So as I mentioned, that's kind of a trickier side of things, but it's great to be aware of as you're doing your shopping and as you're picking your products and materials that you want to invest your money in. So we want to avoid, or minimize this kind of waste wherever it's possible and feasible to do it. So where there's an alternative to some of these problematic alternatives, just do your best to make the best choice for you, whether that be a more highly recyclable option or optimally a reuse option. So I keep talking about reusables, but why is reusable best? What's the benefits of them? And reusables are actually more sustainable than all other single-use options across all of the ways that we can measure environmental impact. So there's a lot of great benefits, and I've just listed a few of some really key ones here today to discuss. First off, you're obviously going to be using fewer single-use items, which is going to mean less pollution and litter in our environment and our communities. On the business side of things, businesses can actually save money on purchasing, long-lasting reusable items. If a restaurant purchases ceramic plates and cutlery, they don't have to buy new disposable items every week. So that's a really great perk as well. When reusables are used, customers don't have to pay for packaging. So, for example, with bringing your own cup or container, businesses will often offer a discount to customers bringing their own reusable. Coffee shops are a particular example in my mind. Often you get some sort of percentage off for bringing your own cup. So that's a really great benefit for the consumer. Cities and towns can actually spend less time and less money collecting waste because there's just less waste generated when we choose to reuse the materials that we already have. There's more transparency in terms of the sustainability of your packaging. Right now, as I said, it can be really confusing as a consumer about, what is and what isn't recyclable or what isn't compostable. And with a reusable container, you can really be certain that at the end of your use, that the packaging is going to have an environmental benefit. You're going to be able to reuse it, which is a good feeling as a consumer as well, as opposed to these other packaging items where maybe we're not so certain about what happens at the end of its life. And overall, we just feel more confident that the products that we're purchasing are actually contributing to better environmental outcomes when we choose a reusable over a single-use alternative. And sometimes this kind of change can seem a bit overwhelming in trying to understand, how we can do our part to make a change. But there are some really simple steps to kind of start your waste reduction journey. The first and easiest one I say is just to prepare and plan ahead of time. We've all been in a situation where we forgot our reusable grocery bags at home, or we forgot our reusable water bottle and had to kind of reluctantly use a single-use alternative. So planning ahead of time and, setting reminders to bring your reusables can be a really effective way to avoid, forgetting. And you can be sure to bring your reusables wherever you go if you set these reminders, or you just plan in advance. Maybe you put your reusables in your car before you leave for the day, that kind of thing. Making deliberate choices in the places where, we shop and where options may be limited or restricted. We hear, so much about what we should and shouldn't be doing to be more sustainable that it's just difficult sometimes to decode the best options from what already exists. But you can walk into, your local grocery store and be more sustainable in just the packaging choices that you make. And it can be as simple as, making the choice between, I'll go back to the peanut butter jar, between your peanut butter in a plastic jar or a glass jar. And where the glass jar is an option, that at the end of its life, it can be reused or repurposed. And you can make that a better option than having to go with a plastic peanut butter jar that may or may not be one of the 9% of plastic packaging that gets recycled. So, just kind of looking at the options that are available to you and picking the ones that are in a more reusable or durable packaging that you might be able to use for other purposes around the house. Another easy thing to look at or look for in products and packaging is, what type of plastic is being used, what color plastic is being used. So if it's a more colorful plastic, that actually may be more difficult to recycle because it can be mixed with other colors and then it becomes less desirable for recyclers, which actually makes it less likely to be integrated into a new product. So an example of a simple switch would just be to look for, a clear PET bottle over a colored bottle. And you might see this in, the beverage section of the store. You might see it in the options that are available for, shampoo and conditioner, but there are tons of choices to be made within those product lines where if you are forced to choose between plastic packaging, that you can make it at least a more recyclable option. And finally, even choosing between a compostable bag or garbage bag or regular plastic garbage bag, where bags can't be composted, it's better to just go with a plastic in some situations, because compostable items that don't end up in compost can actually do more damage in landfill. Items that are manufactured to be compostable tend to release more greenhouse gases in a landfill than even, you know, the other alternatives. So go with a regular plastic where it's absolutely necessary instead of maybe a compostable plastic that may cause even more issues than the original plastic would. So essentially, you know, preparation is key. Convenience sometimes can get a hold of us, and we reach for single use a lot of the time because it's convenient, because it's accessible in that moment. So while we wait for reusable options to become more of a norm, it'll take a little bit more, you know, thought and preparation for us as consumers to seek out some of those better options. But that doesn't necessarily mean that reuse is more expensive or difficult. It's just a newer system that requires some getting used to. And as I mentioned, you know, before, there are so many different pathways to reuse. So we can always look for the reuse solution that's going to work best for us as individuals. And how do we advocate for, you know, more change beyond just these smaller shifts in our daily habits? Um, you know, there's a lot of different things that we can do. You can use your purchasing power to support reuse options that are currently available. You know, try out the new pilots when they become available in stores. Really back independent brands and retailers that are maybe taking some of those risks and leading the change to demonstrate that reuse is possible. Anywhere that you invest your money and purchasing power in a reuse option is really showing, you know, the market and showing businesses everywhere that, you know, there's a demand for reuse, and that people want more options, so that they can expand, you know, the amount of products that they're reusing. You can also support local and shop at refilleries or bulk shops in your area that encourage you to bring your own containers. And beyond just your purchasing power, you can also take some of your concerns to, you know, a local government, municipal government, by contacting or sending a letter to your counselor to let them know about any concerns you may see in your community. You can even volunteer as a member of your council's environmental committee if you're extra passionate about getting involved. Um, you can take your concerns to your favorite brands, your favorite retailers, your favorite restaurants by, you know, writing them a letter or contacting them to express your concern or worry about how much plastic, single-use plastic, is being used in their products and their packaging. And then finally, you can support organizations that are doing this kind of advocacy work in this space and really join in with us in the fight to reduce plastic pollution. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for listening. I can pop my information into the chat as well so that we don't have to keep this thank you screen up. But thank you for your attention, everybody.